Okay, welcome to our spine. So these are the different spinal bones. I said I would take a closer look at them. And we're going to start at the top. And the first cervical bone, what we call C1, we label them C1 through C7, so there are 7 cervical bones. This has a specific name called the atlas. To me, this looks like a shark's mouth. I don't know about you, but to me it looks like a shark's mouth. All right, and into this articulates with C2, which is called the axis. And it's called the axis because it allows the head to turn. This is how you actually turn your head. And what you do, you rotate around this process called the dens. So this is the dens of the axis. All right, so you put that together. We have a nice, you can see the back of it. This allows us to just turn that head. And this fits right up into the occipital condyle that we talked about before. Okay, so now we have the 3 different types of the main spinal bones: the cervical, the thoracic, and the lumbar. And I'm going to show you the difference, and I'm going to show you on each of them some of the processes. So first of all, our cervical bone. This is a small bone. It's a little bone. It doesn't take a lot of weight. All the processes are named the same. So I'm going to go through them. The big piece right here, ever looking at, is called the spinous process. If you run your finger down your back, that what you're feeling is that spinous process. Now, in the cervical bones, they're short. They can be the bifid. They can be split. In the thoracic bones, they hang way down. They're thin. And when we get to the lumbar, they're really thick because that lumbar bone has to take a lot of weight. So when we look at this cervical bone, we have this spinous process. We have 2 processes that stick out of the side for each one of these bones. Those are called the transverse processes. So those are the 2 main processes that you really need to know. And between the spinous process and the transverse process on all our vertebrae are the lamina. Okay? And then we have the body, which is the big part of the bone where the intervertebral discs lay. And the process between the body and the transverse process is called the pedicle. So I'm going to go through each one of these and show this to you. So we have the body, we have the pedicles here and here, the transverse process, the lamina, the spinous process. The unusual thing about a cervical bone is that you have an additional hole. And these are for the nerves, and these are the holes right here. And because they are in the transverse process, they are called transverse foramen. So if you see a transverse foramen on the test, it's got to be a cervical bone. Okay? All right. Then we move to our thoracic bones. The body is heavier than you saw with the cervical bone. And you can see the spinous process, the lamina, a little thicker, the transverse processes, much more defined. You can see the pedicles right here where my fingers are, and then onto this nice, fairly thick body. Okay? And then we move to the big boys. This is your lumbar vertebrae where most of the weight of the body is going to be positioned. So it's got to be a big, thick bone. So we have this nice, thick body. So we have the spinous process. It's shorter, it's thicker. We have our lamina, again, the transverse processes, the pedicles. Okay, so hopefully that helps you with these spinal bones and gets you through these. So I promised I would go over the hip with you, and you can see here we have our lumbar vertebrae with our intervertebral discs. Okay, and one thing I wanted to point out is because these are put together this is a much easier way to show this. If you take a look at these holes right here, this is basically where these spinal nerves are coming out. Okay, so you have two holes when you put these spinal bones together. You have the bone here, which is basically the intervertebral foramen, and then you have the space for the actual spinal cord that runs in, which is the vertebral foramen. So now that we've got these bones together, you can see those clearly. Then we go into our sacrum, and you can see those fused bones, and finally into our coccyx. Now again, this is the hip bone, this is the ilium, this is the iliac crest, this is the sacroiliac joint, so this is the joint between the ilium and the sacrum. And then we have two bones in the front of the pelvic area and run somewhat in the back, and that is the pubis and the ischium. And so if you take an imaginary line and run it right down here in the middle of this hole, which is called the Obturator Foramen, then this right here that I'm holding on right in the front, that is your pubic bone, separated by your pubic symphysis, which is cartilage. And the back portion back here is ischium. And that which we sit on, this little hump back here, is called the ischial tuberosity. And when we sit down, that's what we're sitting on, and you can know that. This also helps us tell, and when you look at a pelvis, is this a male or a female? There's a couple things we look at, but one is the bowl, the shape of this bowl, okay? You got to get a baby's head through there. So in a female, this angle will be wider, okay? In a male, it's a very sharp angle. The other thing is that in the males, the coccyx tends to tuck in a little more, where in the female, it's back. So we could get a baby's head out of there, okay? Especially when this begins to loosen up, the pubic symphysis begins to loosen. Okay? And that's it for our bones. Okay, so this is a wrap on the bones. I really seriously encourage you to go back through these files, go through these individual ones, keep reviewing, go through your worksheets, because you have to know the names of these bones. This is really, really, really important. Okay, thank you very much.